All right, hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Tonight we at Left Bank Books are teaming up with Kimbilio to present Renee Watson, #1 New York Times bestselling author, to discuss her highly anticipated adult novel debut, Skin and Bones. Renee will be in conversation tonight with celebrated St. Louis poet Ariana Benson, so thank you both very much for joining us. So notes before we begin. Tonight's event is only possible because of your support. When you support Left Bank Books, your money goes directly into our local economy, so it helps keep our streets paved, funds our parks, and more. It helps us give writers the support that they deserve and allows us to produce events such as this. So thank you all so much for shopping local and joining us tonight. We also want to extend a welcome to our virtual audience, wherever you are joining us from. We appreciate you being here. You'll be able to participate in the Q&A at the end by leaving your comment as a question on YouTube. So thank you for joining us as well. And like I said, our partner for the event tonight is Kimbilio for Black Fiction. So Kimbilio is an organization that is committed to developing, empowering, and sustaining Black fiction writers and their stories. We are very happy to welcome Professor David Haynes tonight, who is the board chair of Kimbilio, so thank you. For tonight's event, we are so excited to be introducing Renee Watson. Renee is, like I said, a #1 New York Times bestselling author who has authored 15 young adult books over the past decade and collectively has sold more than 1 million copies. She received a Coretta Scott King Award and a Newbery Honor for Piecing Me Together, as well as high praise for the 1619 project Born on the Water. She's on the Council of Writers for the National Writing Project and is a member of the Academy of American Poets Education Advisory Council. She is a writer in residence at the Solstice Residency MFA Creative Writing Program, and she divides her time between New York City and Portland, Oregon. Her new book is Skin and Bones, which is a soulful and lyrical novel exploring sisterhood, motherhood, faith, love, and ultimately what gets passed down from one generation to the next. Through Watson's poetic voice, Skin and Bones is a stirring exploration of who society makes space for, and is ultimately a story of heartbreak and healing. National Book Award winner Jacqueline Woodson calls Skin and Bones a beautifully poetic meditation on race, history, and parenthood. Renee Watson is brilliantly unafraid, and the reward of that fearlessness is on these pages. And we are also honored tonight to be joined by Ariana Benson, who describes herself as a Southern Black eco-poet. Her debut collection, Black Pastoral, won the Cave Canon Poetry Prize and was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Leonard Prize. Benson earned her MFA at Washington University in St. Louis and also holds a Master of Arts in both poetic practice and script writing, which they earned as a Marshall Scholar. Through her writing, she strives to fashion vignettes of Blackness that speak to its infinite depth and richness. So we appreciate her joining us for this conversation tonight. So please join me in welcoming both Ariana Benson and Renee Watson.
I'm so glad to be with you, Renee, this evening. Thank you for joining me. It's so nice to meet you in person. Same to you, really. I'm such a podcast person, so I've heard your voice as you talked about your writing. So we'll start there with hearing your voice and as you read from the beginning of the book. Hello, virtual folks, and hello, everyone here. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm going to read from the beginning, so there's not a lot to set up, but I do want you to know Lena is turning 40, and she lives in Portland, Oregon. She is getting married soon, and she's going to the doctor. And I'm going to skip around the first chapter, but what you should know is that she has said several times what her symptoms are, and she is not being heard. So in this scene, she's beginning to be frustrated because she feels like they're not listening to her. Yeah, that's all I'll say right now, and then we'll get into it. Skin and bones, the weight I carry. I do not want to die fat. There would no doubt be whispers at the repast. It's too bad she didn't take better care of herself. They will speculate, assume, diabetes, heart attack. If I die fat, I hope I die in a car accident or go missing and turn up bloated and bloody in a river. No one will mention my weight then. I will die without conversation about the obesity epidemic, and my family and friends can grieve without the added guilt from flashbacks of every time they wanted to say something,
about the pounds I was putting on, but didn't. Because here's the thing, I am not thick or big boned or voluptuous. I am fat, obese, morbidly obese. That's what the nurse just typed into my chart. She is a wafer of a woman, the kind of woman who looks like she'll fall over should a big wind blow. This is the woman typing in the word morbid to describe this body. Everything about me is big and black, big and majestic like the ocean. Every bit of me hard to contain. My belly spills over and so do my tears, and so does my joy, and every family recipe, and every heartache, and every weekend spent at Seaside Beach. It's all here with me, heavy. It's all here, sitting on this table, the layer of the thinnest tissue paper under me, holding all this blackness, all this bigness. I feel the tissue paper rip under me. Wonder why they don't make it more sturdy. I pull the too small gown together as best I can. It is tight around my flabby arms and doesn't cover my breast or stretch marked stomach. I might as well be sitting here naked. You would think doctors' offices would have large robes for their patients. Don't patients come in all sizes? The nurse doesn't realize that I can see what she's typed. She enters the words so matter of fact. And in the space for more notes, she types, morbidly obese, but seems happy, dressed well, good hygiene. I stare at the word but, morbidly obese, but. She types again, but I look away. Can I take the urine sample now? I really have to go. We'll get to that. Give me just a moment. First, I need to take your blood pressure and temperature. She takes my pressure. My arm tightens to the point it feels like it's going to explode. And then when she lets the air out, my arm relaxes. Wow, pretty great numbers, she says, like she is surprised, like she expected there to be an issue. Okay, I'm gonna get the doctor now. Give her just a moment. While I wait, I fidget with the platinum miracle on my left hand. 2 more weeks and I'll be Miss Lena Wilson, wife of Malcolm Wilson. God, please let this bladder infection pass quickly. I've got a honeymoon to Hawaii to get ready for. I twist the ring, trace the diamond with the tip of my finger. That skinny nurse didn't have a ring on. I hate that I just had this thought. I do not want to wear this engagement ring like an Olympic medal, hard fought for, hard won. But it does feel like an accomplishment. I did work for this. After everything I went through with Brian, the on again, off again, so much heartbreak, heart healing, finally, I am here. Malcolm is my prize, and I am his. I look down at my dangling feet, thinking about the words the nurse used to describe me. Morbidly obese, but seems happy, dressed well, good hygiene. Glad I got that pedicure yesterday. My toes are painted a bright cantaloupe color, my heels smooth and silky. I always leave the house casket ready. I got that from Mom, who we all call Honey. Whenever I'd leave the house, she'd ask, you got on clean clothes? And I knew she was not talking about my shirts or jeans or socks. She was talking about my bra and panties. If you get in a car accident, you don't want to be unladylike when the paramedics come. Always a lesson from Honey and Grandma about taking care of myself, but never for myself. Just when I decide to find a cup and go to the bathroom myself, the doctor knocks, comes in. And what brings you in today, Lena? She asks, not looking at me. She scrolls through my file, reading while I talk. I think I have a bladder infection. I get them often since I was a child, so I kind of know the symptoms. Okay, well, I like to check your blood sugar too. Have you ever been tested for diabetes? No, I haven't. But today I'm here for, I think I have a bladder infection and I came ready to take the urine sample. So if we could get that going, that would be, I, I really have to go. Yes, we'll get to that, but I need to check a few other things. A woman your size, it could be something else. She says she needs to review my family history. I want to tell her what's not on that chart. She wants medical history, physical ailments, but I think she should know it all. The almost dead, the died too soon, The divorces and sage loves, the births, rebirths, stillbirths, the car accidents, graduations, holiday dinners, the first days of school, last days of childhood, every birthday, every happy hour, 4th of July picnics at Blue Lake Park, baptisms, breakdowns, excruciating laughter, electric slide at up all night house parties. What's been passed down is Aunt Aretha's recipe for lemon pound cake that must be made for every arrival and departure of breath. She asked for my family history. I could tell her, but I know better. The non-wafer, non-morbid woman leaves, comes back with a plastic cup. Finally, the urine sample. Then waiting and waiting. Another knock and the words, bladder infection, antibiotics. And the blood sugar, I ask, normal, but you should be careful carrying all that weight. I recommend trying to lose at least 5 to 10% of your body weight, and then we can reassess and put you on a weight loss plan. My doctor wants to put me on a weight loss plan, even though my test results are normal. Before she leaves the room, she offers an affirmation. You know, she starts, you are a beautiful woman. I hope you know that. Your skin, your hair, just gorgeous. I smile, kind of, I think. Yes, this is a smile, a thank you. I open my mouth to say something, to correct her, scold her, to ask why she felt the need to tell me that she thinks I am pretty, but my words do not come. Only her words are here now. They are hanging in the stale, sanitized room. When I leave, they come with me. Words are like that. They follow, linger, stay a while. Here I am, carrying what is not mine, heavy.
Thank you. Um, I really wanted to start out because some of my experiences of this book and what really excited me about it, I think, was the kind of portrayal of interiority, right? In this scene, it's a very kind of, it should be a routine moment, right?
Right.
You're going to the doctor,
Yes.
you have something wrong with you, they run some tests, they say, here, okay, do this. But what we really get here is an exploration of Lena's interiority, what she goes through as a fat woman, as a Black woman, as all of those things combined in the moment, right? And I'm also thinking about your work, of course, very celebrated as a children's author. And to me, the best children's books are the ones that teach us about emotional intelligence, interiority, right? Those kind of finer, small points of what it is to be human. And so I guess I wanted to talk to you about how the body and size and the way that the world treats Lena for her body versus the way that she sees herself and her body was a way to kind of introduce her character in this, what should be a mundane scene.
Yeah, I just wanted the reader to immediately know that this is an everyday occurrence. It's so ordinary for Lena to step into a space and immediately realize that someone's judging her just because of how she looks. And sometimes she doesn't know if it's because of her skin color or her size or her gender, but throughout the book, there are moments where she knows that there's a confrontation or a microaggression or something's happening in the room. And she may not be able to pinpoint it. Here it's a little more obvious of what it is, but that is her everyday existence. And the book is exploring that idea of we come into this world whole. We come into this world without thinking about what beauty is and who deserves what and who doesn't. And our mamas and daddies and aunties and uncles and community members love on us and tell us we can be anything, we're smart, we're beautiful, we're brilliant. And then we go out into the world. And that is when I believe we learn, especially women, and especially Black women, when we learn the texture of our hair, the skin tone, the width of our bodies is not beautiful or not as smart as our mamas told us we were. So she is thinking about, how do I remain whole in a world that wants to break me? And how do I help my daughter? Her daughter's 8 years old, and she's having to think about, what is she passing on to her child about beauty and love and healing and all of that too?
Absolutely. I think that's really kind of you've encapsulated the experience of like just being a Black woman and being told on the one hand, again, you are beautiful if you're someone who gets that kind of love, right, from your community. And then having to try to use that as a shield to combat against these messages from the world, from those outside spaces. And it creates kind of an almost like Voisian double consciousness that I think we can see Lena experiencing, right? Another thing I wanted to ask was just, again, I really think it's interesting that the first line in the book is about dying. I don't want to die fact. Because this is a book that is so much about life, right? Those moments that really kind of make up a life, even if it's not the grander things that you might see in an obituary. And it's something that I really liked about the book. I wanted you to talk about kind of that existing in a worldview where you're concerned about what shape or form you'll take when you die, and that exteriority being the end value of the experience.
Well, she goes on to say why, and it's actually not because she doesn't think her body is beautiful. She is worried about what people will say about her and the burden that her family will have to explain away. I remember, there were two things that impacted me to write that particular line. And one was many, many years ago. I don't remember his name. He was one of the main characters of The Sopranos, and he died suddenly.
Oh, James Gandolfini.
Yeah. And I remember headlines. We're talking about this man's weight and speculating on what happened. And there was an article about the last meal he ate and how he was doing damage to his body and all these things that I just felt like this person is loved by a family. And I just couldn't believe that people were so caught up in how he died and not the life he lived and the legacy he was living. So that just stayed with me. And then I was writing this, the final drafts of this during COVID. And at that time, and it was in the early days when there was so much about if you fit this description, this like check, check, check. And obesity was on the list. It was affecting the Black community the most. And so yeah, all of that was on my mind and thinking about Lena carrying the burden of not wanting her family to have to explain away something like that. It hit me hard when the line came to me that she would be concerned about that. And not because she's concerned about the actual body, but what people feel about her body and think about her body.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting because Lena as a character very clearly understands that the shame of the way the world experiences and comments and judges on her body is not hers to carry, right. And she doesn't carry it. But at a certain point, there are still things that will penetrate again, that shield. And so it's a really kind of interesting doubling.
It's hard. It's hard to know something and to hold on to what you know to be true. I think so often that is the struggle, right? It's not that we don't know the truth. It's that there's so many things pushing against that truth. And so how do you gird yourself up to hold on and to be anchored in something? And so for her mother, her aunt, her friends, they become these anchors for her. And they're not perfect anchors. There's some rocking and some waves that they all endure, but they are a sure thing. And they're all kind of growing and learning and healing together.
Well, let's talk about some of those waves. I'll have you read a part about the relationships and the sisterhoods that are really kind of on Lena's web and Lena's world.
So Lena is one of three. There's this friendship, this bond between three friends, and they are all turning 40 this year. They all have grown up together. They were on their mama's laps in the front row, the front pew of the church. She is the daughter of a pastor, so she's a PK. And that comes with, an expectation of how she should be and move in the world. And in this scene, we learned how these three girls became for real friends. There's that moment where you hang out or you see someone and you're in their world, and then something happens and you're like, oh, this is my friend. Like, this isn't just someone I go to school with or someone who lives on my block or the person I sing next to in the fire stand at church. This is my girl. And this is the moment when they realize that and they bond as friends. Origin story. Our solidarity was cemented the day we took a field trip to the zoo in the 5th grade. The school bus was loud and rowdy and everything a school bus should be. A boy at the back of the bus named Dion called Aspen asphalt because of her dark skin. We could barely spell asphalt, but we knew it wasn't a compliment, especially when all of Dion's sidekicks chimed in with oohs and ahs that said, "That's a sting, he's stinging." Kendra started at first, got all up in Dion's face and told him someone with teeth that bucked and shoes that raggedy shouldn't be talking about no one. And I reminded him that his mamas and sisters were dark, just like Aspen. So what was he even saying? We told Aspen not to worry about that buck-toothed, raggedy shoe-wearing boy and said, "Come sit with us." And somehow we made room for the three of us to sit on that green school bus seat. The pleather was sweaty and clinging to the bare parts of our legs because we were wearing shorts. When we got to the zoo, we stuck together all day. And when Kendra realized she forgot her lunch, Aspen and I shared our lunches our mothers made. We never declared it, never had BFF bracelets, but we knew. We'd always be there for each other, always.
I think one of the things that is so special about this book, and it really cements it in kind of a beautiful literary tradition that I, of course, attribute to Toni Morrison, is that writing about Black women's friendships with such depth and such, again, curiosity about the details, right, the small moments. Can you tell me the ways that Black women's friendship has not only informed your worldview, right, your sisterhood, but also kind of your creativity, your attention to detail, those finer moments, those looks that you share with a sister across the room where you only know what that means, right? Yes. And that how that might attune you to the world as a writer who's trying to always notice the small thing, because those are the moments that matter.
I love that you brought up that look. I talk about this all the time. I really want my books to be that glance, that knowing when something weird has happened in a space or something offensive or whatever. There's always a something happening in a room. And you find the person, even if you don't know them, you find someone who saw it too. And you're like, girl, what is it? That look is what I want my books to do for the reader. I want to be saying to you, I see it too. You're not making it up. This world is hard. Yeah, I know they judge us. I know that sometimes you have to breathe in and just go out into the world and try to survive the day, but you can come back to a safe place and let these pages hug you and hold you and remind you that there are women who love you. And if you don't have them in your real life, you have your ancestors, you have writers like Toni and Maya Angelou and all these folks who left on record how to survive this hard world. And so when I think about sisterhood and the everyday small moments, those are the moments that have kept me. Sometimes you love the big gesture, right? I love it when I'm celebrated in a big way or I get the spotlight. But what I really love is when a person can just sit with me, just come over. We're not doing nothing. We're flipping channels. We're talking, laughing. You might order some food. That's not a gourmet meal, but we're just bearing witness with each other and being in each other's presence, and that is healing. And so in the book, I wanted to have those moments with these girlfriends who are all big women. They're all different sizes within plus size, because I also wanted to make sure that the story of a big Black woman growing up in the Pacific Northwest was nuanced and not a caricature. If Lena's the only big girl, then she has to carry the burden of representing big women. And it could easily fall into her being the sidekick friend or big mama, knowing, wise one. So if you have three dark-skinned Black women who are all big, some of those things can kind of just go to the side and I can focus on their friendship, how they love each other, and how they're different. They're friends, but they are not the same. And I think I was playing around with that. Some of the people I'm the closest to, our personalities are quite different, but we love each other deep. And that love keeps us together. So yeah, I was trying to explore also, how do you love complicated people? I think we talk about sisterhood and I don't want to paint this picture like it's perfect and that friendship is perfect. So they have arguments and disagreements, and some things are like, no, you hurt me for real. And that was wrong. And I still love you. Not but and. I'm hurt by you, and I still love you. And how are we going to heal from this instead of just throwing the relationship away? So Lena's figuring all of that messiness out, how to love and forgive her mom and all these other like women relationships in her life that she's healing and growing from.
You said a few things there that really interested me, but especially that was one of the things that I noticed right away was that somebody who might not have lived those experiences might see Kendra, Aspen, and Lena and think, these are three of essentially the same person, right? Because they are three fat, dark-skinned Black women from Portland, you know? So all of those kind of identifying markers of race, age, size, where you're from, make them the same. And I was telling you this, this past weekend, I went to Spelman, and so I got to go back to college, and it was all, it's my 5-year reunion, and we're all Black women there. And something that people used to ask me a lot was, well, if you're all Black women, where's the diversity? Where's the difference between you, right? And so, something that we really, really see elucidated is the difference internally between these characters, right? Kendra's more, kind of spicy. Aspen is a little bit more, of a
Conservative.
Yeah, because I was
daughter of a deacon.
Yeah, exactly. And so just, again, that exploration of the interior world and these Black women, not just as representing these groups that they exist as a part of, right? But the interiority.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask you then, because they have three very different experiences of the way the world sees them. There was one, and I did not bookmark this page, but I think you'll know what I'm talking about. It's just a shortish chapter where it's about when they're 13, and it's at 13, Aspen was big, Kendra was bigger, I was biggest. And so I want to ask you about, again, where do you think those inflection points are in a young Black girl's life where you go from being understood and seen as a girl and feeling yourself as a girl to feeling yourself as a woman? Because it does have a lot to do with understanding what your body looks like in relation to others in a way that you just wouldn't think about before.
Yeah, and I think the way in which people talk about your bodies. So I think Kendra is learning a lot, and her daughter is learning a lot about what it means to be a big, dark-skinned girl or woman by how the adults in her life treat her and talk to her. So she had, her grandmother is very harsh and very, she's policing her food and always making comments. And sometimes she thinks it's just a lighthearted joke, but those things hurt. And then you have people who, the women, the porch women, sitting on the porch watching you. Girl, okay, I see you getting big, better watch out. That kind of, I think that's when girls start to learn, like, oh, my body is changing. You can see that, but the judgment on that change comes from the way in which people respond to it. And that's when you either learn your body is changing for the better or for the worse. And Kendra is learning, oh, this is no longer, I've reached a point where I'm not chubby cute. Oh, look at her, thick girl. I'm big, and I'm so big that now I've crossed a line that is not beautiful or worthy of love. She's always like an exception to a rule. You know that you're so smart for a Black girl. You're so articulate. Like we're used to, now, I think, do not say that. But we still say things like, she's pretty for a thick girl. That girl be wearing cute clothes. Girl, you're confident. Where do you get, and the undertone of that is the message that you are an exception to a rule because most big women are not.
Right, there's subtext.
Yeah, always.
There's subtext.
Yeah, so I think that is how girls are learning it. And in the book, Aaliyah, the daughter, she's listening. Our babies are always listening and watching. And so I think Lena, at a very expensive cost, realizes, oh, my daughter is hanging on every word I say and all the things that I do. And I need to be a little more careful of what I am passing down to her and what I'm saying in front of her.
So yeah, let's talk about Aaliyah then, because she's such a huge figure to the book and a character that I really fell in love with. We'll start again. I'm such a craft person. I'm really curious about the ways that, again, your writing and your work as a children's author allowed you to kind of create a 9-year-old character that had such depth and such curiosity, right? Aaliyah is attentive and she notices things. And when she says that, I'll let you talk a bit more about this part, but something happens with a white student at school that really hurts her. She says at first, well, no, she wasn't bullying me. She said something mean. And I think something that I loved about Aaliyah was that she tends to see the world through a redemptive lens.
Yeah.
She's not someone who's labeling people, you're mean, you're a bully, you know. And I wonder too if a lot of children aren't the same way, where you do see the world through a redemptive lens. But then if you are, again, a little fat Black girl, how does that redemptive lens kind of get chipped away into a pessimistic lens?
Yeah, so I really was thinking about what does it mean for Lena to show up on the page at 40 in her big body, that she's lived a lot of life, so she kind of knows how this world is, right? Aaliyah is figuring it out. She's right at that turning point at 8, growing up and realizing, oh, my teacher is starting to treat me different because I'm asking a lot of questions. And she takes it as me being sassy or me wanting to be a know-it-all. Like, oh, that it's no longer a good thing to be engaged in classrooms. Or, or this kid who calls me a hippopotamus because they're reading, what is it, George and Martha. So I think I was trying to just show where are those points where a child is, I caught like the bruising when you're walking down the street. I live in New York, and so there's always the bumping. Excuse me. You're just trying to get through, and there's a lot of knocking around. And if you think about your spirit bumping and knocking around all day long, microaggression here, a judgment there. You watch the news. There's all these things coming at you, either telling you you're not worthy enough, you're not good enough. So much is going on in the world. There's a lot that is stinging and pricking, and so you come home bruised and sore. Who is healing you? Where do you find rest? Where do you get restoration? And even the little ones are feeling it. And I think because I've been with them, writing for them and doing book tours and talking to them for so long, I respect their intelligence. They use different words, but they are the same feelings. They understand what it means to be judged and pushed aside, and they know what's not fair. We say those are soft skills, like when you're learning empathy, kindness, sharing, collaborating. Those are very hard things to do. And when you were young, first, second, third grade, those are the skill sets that are being taught. And so they very much understand injustice. And I think in having written for them for so long, I wanted to talk to their parents and their aunties and teachers and mentors who are loving our young people. I want us to think about, what are we passing down to them? How can we show up for them? How can we help them heal? And how can we teach them maybe not to make those same mistakes that we made in judging people's bodies and commenting on people's bodies? Like, how can we change that?
This wasn't one of the passages that you selected before, but could you read a little bit from the Aaliyah chapter? And I also will talk about the structure of the book, because I think for me it's 2:30.
Oh, right. You have to argue.
Yeah.
We'll see. 2:30.
Yes. And it's the chapter that's titled just Renee and Aaliyah.
Yes.
Yeah, could you just read a little? And I'm specifically kind of thinking about the end of this chapter, the conclusion that Lena arrives at, and how that kind of encapsulates the book.
Sure. Let's see. So she's talking to her teacher. She's thinking about when Aaliyah was in the 2nd grade. And she went to a teacher-parent conference. This is part of that conversation. She's so good at sharing with her classmates, and I can always count on her to volunteer when I ask for a little helper. But I have to say, she can be a little sassy at times. Sassy? What do you mean by that? Well, she questions everything. Oh, so she's curious. well, I wouldn't say curious, more like combative. Always challenging something I'm saying or interrupting without raising her hand to ask a question. Just the other day, I was teaching about the life cycle of plants, and Aaliyah could hardly let me teach. She kept interrupting me to tell me that she already knew about seeds and germination and roots. Yeah, she gardens with her grandmother, and I've given her books about plants because she's fascinated by them. I think maybe she was just excited. I tried to sound even. No inflection in my voice, no attitude, no sass. My daughter knows how to be respectful, but I can see how her enthusiasm made her forget to raise her hand. Oh, it's not just about her not raising her hand. It's that she always wants to share what she knows, what she's already learned, or a book she's reading. It's disruptive, and it can be intimidating to the other children. I was stunned that Aaliyah's engagement was being taken as disrespect. Before I could gather my words, the teacher was standing and reaching out her hand to shake mine. Her next appointment had arrived. I left and drove to a bookstore. I bought Aaliyah more books on plants and gardening, and the whole way home, I promised myself that I would nurture Aaliyah's zeal for learning, encourage her to read and study and ask questions, and share her knowledge, wondering the whole way home why the brilliance and boldness of Black girls is so often seen as defiance.
And this you felt that, right? This chapter absolutely hit me to my core as that, curious, excitable Black girl at one point who had that taken as disrespect and dulled and full of the ways the road chips away. But what really I loved about this chapter again is what Lena decides to do after.
Yeah.
She goes to the bookstore and she says, I'm gonna nurture my baby. I'm gonna encourage this more. And it made me think about, as we kind of go towards talking about motherhood, because I really want to get into Lena's dynamic with Honey, her mother. Think about the ways that something that is unique to a kind of experience of Black womanhood and Black motherhood for me, or that I've noticed, is that you have to nurture your children in a way that has to compensate for the ways that the world not only doesn't nurture them, but can also damage their roots and can nip those little early buds, right? And so, it's kind of a balancing act, or at least I imagine that it is, as a Black mother, in wanting to water your children, wanting to nurture love, but then again, loving them in ways that are healthy, in ways that will help them grow, in the ways that they need to be loved. And there's always, I think, with parents, right, there's a gap. You're going to do your best. You're going to, raise your child in the ways that you were raised and were beautiful, and in the ways that you might have needed, right? But there's always in love a little bit of a gap between the way that the person needs to be loved and the way that you can give that love. And so there was a part specifically, I think, that made me think about this with Honey a little later on. But I want you to guess what Honey says in the chapter. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so when I was young, Lena is a pastor's child. There's a lot of church in here. I grew up in the church as well. And I remember I could be very critical of the adults in the congregation, my youth pastor, or even teachers. I was that child that was like, you're not doing this right.
Me too.
Or I was the one that could absolutely say, but you said this and you're doing that, right? And then I turned 25 and I realized, oh, wait a minute. When I was 14, my youth pastor was only 25, right? But back then, when I was 14, 13,
so grown. You're a whole good adult.
What do you know at 25 to really believe? So I just got so much compassion, grace for people in my life who were trying and who were, doing their best. And so in this moment, there's been some painful things have happened, and Honey, the mother, Lena's mother, is trying to tell her, listen, I know I wasn't perfect, but come on now. Come on, give me some grace. And so this is a painful conversation, but a necessary one, especially given this world we're living in now, where there's so many resources and so many unpacking and reflecting and healing talk. And I think Honey is of a generation where you just pray about it.
Right.
So she was like, what are you
pray
talking
about
about?
it.
Counseling and therapy and all this stuff. She just did the best that she could. What Honey says. You think I didn't notice that year after year your size went up and down when we go shopping? I didn't ignore that. I chose to affirm you. I knew there would be enough people pointing out every pound, commenting on your weight. I knew you'd have a lifetime of diets and exercise if you wanted to do that. I knew you could learn that on your own. But loving yourself, I taught you that. That took priority. I made sure you were clean, that your hair was done, that your clothes were cute and fit just right. And what did I tell you every single morning? Huh? What did I say? I said, good morning, beautiful. From the time you were a day old till the day you moved out of my house for college, I woke you up by saying, good morning, beautiful. Because you are beautiful. And I wanted you to know that, to hear it first from me. I wanted those words to be so embedded in you that you would never, ever doubt it. No matter what or who told you otherwise, I was not a perfect mother, Lena. I didn't know anything about these fat body movements or whatever you call it. And I didn't have blogs to read because there were no blogs and there were no support groups for mothers with overweight daughters. So I am sure I could have done some things differently. But I loved you. I loved you well. That ought to count for something.
Very, very good. And I guess I read this, right, and I think again, so much of this book that I found beautiful was that the characters seemed to have, and some of this was sparked by difficult things happening, right, but seemed to have a really unique willingness to have those difficult conversations, right? And there's a point, and again, I'm trying not to give spoilers, but this is after something really difficult has happened as it relates to Aaliyah and the community of Kendra, Aspen, Honey, Aunt Aretha, right, who I believe is Honey's sister, come and support Lena and Aaliyah through this time. But there are also interesting conversations about their relationships, about things that are happening out in the world that happen. And there's a moment where Aspen asks, so the question is, how do we heal? And it's just Aspen words hang in the room. Aretha doesn't answer, Honey doesn't say a word. But the silence is not awkward or uncomfortable. Instead, it is soothing. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled with words or noise. The kind of silence that gives us permission to sit and ponder. I love the way that this story takes pleasure in those kind of unsaid moments as much as it does the conversations. And then also, again, the answer that Aunt Aretha gives. I want you to just read this last part of this chapter if you could. I'd love to hear it.
What page are you?
I'm on 305.
Okay. So she's asked the question. So then the question is, how do we heal? The question lingers unanswered. How do we heal? And after more than a moment, after more tea, after more talking, after the tears dry up, after eating the rest of the shortbread cookies, after washing the mugs and plates, after wiping down the counter, after hugs, and just before saying goodbye, Aunt Aretha says, ain't this how? Ain't this how?
And ain't this how? And that's, I guess, what I want to ask you, a kind of more overarching question about the book is what conversations that you hope this might inspire, or what healing you hope that this work might spark between Black women.
I really hope that we talk openly about what we've been left, like the legacies that we're inheriting. Lena is getting a lot of a legacy from Black activists and ancestors who really built the city of Portland. So she's learning about folks she'll never know. They didn't even know her name, but they had her in mind. And then she's getting all this legacy from her parents. So I want us to talk about, what did our parents teach us? What did the ancestors leave for us? What are we giving to the next generation? How can we heal? How can we be in community? And how can we forgive and love complicated people? And how can we also show ourselves grace? I think there's a lot of, with Honey and with Lena, they are also learning That it's not always that I need to show up for you. Sometimes I just gotta learn how to show up for myself and forgive myself. And so that's a big part of the conversation I hope we're having too.
And I think that giving grace is a skill that would be made even more difficult when, because to me, I see grace and shame kind of being on opposite ends of the spectrum. So when you've gone through life experiencing shame for, again, multiple areas of things that you were just born into, ways of being, then it's tough to even learn how to give grace to yourself.
Absolutely.
And so that might be the first path to having that forgiveness for others, is to forgive yourself for the things that are not your fault, for the things that you did because you're human,
Right.
for, just things that happen as a part of life, and then forgiving others accordingly. Yeah, I love that. How are we doing on time?
We've got time for a couple questions if you like.
Okay, questions?
Here's the prior question. And as I was thinking about this, I realized I was thinking about it the wrong way. Or I may be thinking about it the wrong way. I was going to ask you about pivoting from writing an adult to writing an adult novel, but I realized that may not have been a pivot at all. But so talk about different experiences of writing for the two audiences.
Thank you. And thank you for saying that maybe it wasn't a pivot. I always say I'm a storyteller. And so sometimes a story comes to me and it's a poem or it's a picture book or a middle grade novel. And this came to me in adult voices, so it needed to be an adult novel. But I've been working on this for a really long time. I needed to grow up. I needed to live some more life. There's a love relationship, it's dating, and there's a lot happening. And I knew these characters a long time ago, and that they needed to sit and simmer and just be on the back burner, getting all those, seasonings up in there, cooking real slow while I was doing some other things. Yeah. So I guess the biggest pivot was I'm able to leave some more things untied. I think I tied things up a little bit more for younger people because they need that kind of closure emotionally in a story. So I was worried less about making sure every single storyline, how it's going to end. I trust that adults can, read between some lines or also just not know. So I think that was for me the biggest thing. And then I wanted to experiment. So if you look at the book, the words are merged into the middle of the page. I wanted the book to represent Lena squeezing into a space not made for her. I wanted the book to feel tight and be a thick, but literally a thick book, a heavy book. Even though once you start reading it, I think it doesn't read as a heavy book. So I wanted that, like you can literally the cliche of judging a book by its cover or a person by what they look like, getting to know them for real. So I was working through all of that, and I think I did a lot more experimenting. There are chapters that are just a sentence, there are chapters that are definitions, and then more traditional chapters with dialogue and setting. So I played around a little bit more with format than I do in my children's books. Yes.
Can you say a little bit about the title of the book? It's interesting that in the way that fat and heavy can be a negative, skin and bones can be a negative.
Yes.
Because when someone dies and it's like, okay, was they on drugs? Did they have AIDS? Because they are skin and bones. And in the church space, being heavy can be like a badge of honor.
Right.
Because the best singers are heavy.
Come on.
The best homes in the kitchen are heavy.
Who you want cooking your food?
Right.
So a Skinner book, yes, it has many layers of meaning. It is the play on, well, if she's so big, then what do we think about when we're saying like skin and bone? You're so bony, so skinny, that kind of thing. I was also thinking about the bones of our ancestors that are buried. She's doing a lot of digging up of history, and that there are actual remnants left of people who prayed us into existence. And then there's a moment that it's not ruining anything. Her dad, who's a pastor, he's preaching, and he talks about ashes to ashes, dust to dust. At the end of the day, all we are skin and bones. All of that is just going to fade away. So what is your actual legacy versus what the body you leave behind? No one talks about that at a funeral, actually. We pay so much attention to it while we're living. But when we are really talking about the people we miss and love, we really are talking about the essence of who they were. and not this frame that I'm in, the shell that I'm in. So it's digging into all of that.
It makes me think of how the most important physical thing to me that you get to hold, especially at a lot of Black funerals, which will say homegoing, and I'm from the South, so we say homegoing. Okay, right. So yeah, and I have a little thing to say about that. I want to have you read one more thing, but is the obituary. Right, because that's where you get the story of the person's life, right? That's where you get who they really were. And also I love that it lists the family members. It's not just who they were, it's who they loved, who loved them. Because that's really who we are at the end of the big day of life, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you to read really quickly as a kind of going out neighborhood. And I wanted to save this for the end because when I read this, I'm someone who has lived in or, kind of been in communities that are the neighborhood, right? I was born in Norfolk, Virginia. I went to college in Atlanta, Georgia. Now I live in St. Louis. And reading this chapter, you could have been talking about any of those. And so I just wanted to, have you talk a little bit about how you painted the portrait of what it means to live in a Black community, what that looks like, and then leave us with these gorgeous words.
Thank you. So I love that about us, that we are who we are wherever we are. And there are just some things about Black neighborhoods that, like you said, it does not matter where you live. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and there is very much a feel of the South. There's very much a feel of Black culture in our neighborhoods.
Well, the Great Migration, which is a
yes,
big thing
right.
about
And
this.
we don't talk a lot about Black folks who migrated to the Pacific Northwest. But this book gives a little bit of that history of what happened when we got there and how we were treated and how we built our Black spaces there. So this, I'll skip around a little bit, but this is neighborhoods. There has to be an MLK Boulevard, for that is the artery. Is this on? It's not. I think it just died on us. That's okay. Oh, this okay. I hear myself. Neighborhoods. There has to be an MLK Boulevard, for that is the artery, and also a wing spot where the chicken is worth standing in line for. And also a Caribbean spot that might be open, might not. That might have jerk chicken, might not. And a hair salon where women stop by who don't even need their hair done. Just come through to say hello, catch up on the latest gossip. And you might see hair weave blowing down the streets, swirling with the fallen leaves, tangled with deferred dreams, blowing right past the check cashing spots and the liquor store, and also the old drunk who is not as mean or scary as you first thought, and the old woman on her porch, nosy and all-knowing, keeping the toll of births and deaths and the comings and goings of the block. There is music always, from the church house, the club, a car whose bass is so strong the cement quakes, and there are fireworks just because. Just before and just after the 4th of July, just before and just after Labor Day. There is always yellow crime tape somewhere blowing in the wind, like ribbon dancing from a little girl's ponytail. And makeshift memorials, burned out candles, dried flowers, and faded photos set up in front of corner stores, under a tree, on a chain link fence, to honor the dead. And there are car washes and parking lots that are raising funds for a church's youth group, and a woman buying chocolate bars for $1 telling the child, keep the candy, I just wanted to support your cause. And women tell each other, watch out for him, don't walk down that block at night. And girl, Safeway is having a sale on eggs. And girl, so-and-so is single now. And so-and-so is pregnant again. And girl, so-and-so got up out of here and made something for himself, didn't he? And you always know a newcomer, an outsider, because they walk past without speaking. And the elders clear their throats, say, good morning. Teach folks that round here, we speak. Round here, we love. Thank you. Thank you so much for being in conversation with me. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you both so much. If you haven't gotten your books yet, because we've got Renee's, of course, Skin and Bones, as well as some of her children's books at the desk. We also have Black Pastoral. And we'll get some books signed up here, so we'll form a line kind of this way a bit. So thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you all.
Thank you all. Definitely.